Celestia is a rather unique and intriguing character by any show standards, being a literal god, practical ruler, and mentor to the protagonist Twilight Sparkle. However, everything about her character has been called into question by the community, from her seemingly deceptive advice, to her practical jokes, and even her very divinity itself. Thus, it is my aim in this video to defend our sovereign, and present a view of her that encompasses and accounts for the very beliefs she has attracted over the years, using both ancient Greek paganism and Christian theology to do so. To begin with then, I will look at the pagan interpretation of Celestia, in order to address the part of her character most often criticised, her divinity. Most ancient Greek belief about the gods was driven by their portrayal in the epic poems, the Odyssey and the Iliad, by Homer, whose study formed a decent percentage of Greek education. These views were further reinforced by Greek dramas such as the tragedies of Sophocles. In these poems we are presented with a mythical landscape complete with hydras, manticores, and pegasi. As a result, it seems likely that in drawing inspiration from Greek mythology for so much of the world's inhabitants, Faust also drew inspiration from the pagan gods when creating Celestia. The main issue fans find with proclaiming Celestia a god is the fact that she is not omnipotent, as evidenced by her being unable to completely defeat Nightmare Moon, and later being defeated by Chrysalis. This objection is understandable, as the majority of the audience, myself included, have been exposed from an early age to Christian doctrines of God, including omnipotence, and thus the thought of a god without this attribute is entirely alien to us. However, if we accept, as argued previously, that Celestia is modelled on pagan gods, this criticism melts away, as no pagan god was omnipotent in the truest sense of the word. Instead, they were merely very much more powerful than mortals. Even Zeus, the most powerful of the Olympians, is often tricked by other gods. An example of this is when Hera sabotages his attempts at helping the Trojans during the Trojan War, in the Iliad. Hera summons Zeus and overpowers him using an amulet from Aphrodite, causing him uncontrollable lust. Upon sleeping with her, he falls asleep, allowing for Poseidon to change the tide of the battle. Thus, a pagan god, even the king, or princess of the gods, are not omnipotent, but merely incredibly powerful, and Celestia's divinity is safe from this criticism. Another major issue people find with Celestia is her supposed malevolence. Nicknames such as Celestia and Molestia have evolved from observations of Celestia's actions and words in the show. The first example of this was in the first episode of the show.
My dearest, most faithful student, Twilight, you know that I value your diligence and that I trust you completely. But you simply must stop reading those dusty old books. My dear Twilight, there is more to a young pony's life than studying. So I'm sending you to supervise the preparations for the Summer Sun celebration in this year's location, Ponyville. And I have an even more essential task for you to complete. Make some friends! Aww.
Celestia tells Twilight to stop reading those dusty old books and to make some friends. However, the audience learns at the end of the two-parter that in reality the princess knew all along that Nightmare Moon was going to return, and that the only way to stop her was if Twilight harnessed the elements of harmony, for which she would require friends. The criticism goes, therefore, that if she knew that ahead of time, why not mention it? It does seem a foolish and even deliberately deceptive route to take, but once again in this example, and others like it, are put into perspective by looking at the pagan ideas. In the pagan religion, the gods often spoke in riddles to the heroes, and only spoke candidly to other gods. For example, in Sophocles' Oedipus Tyrannus, Apollo, through an oracle, tells Oedipus he must drive the corruption from the land. In actuality, Oedipus himself is corruption, and although Apollo knows this, he doesn't mention it, instead allowing the mortals to work it out for themselves. Thus Celestia can be seen as following the norm for pagan gods, in deliberately leaving information out. The reason the gods act in this way is another important point, though, and the main hole in this argument. Pagan gods are not good as we would understand the term today. Unlike Christianity's god, pagan gods do not love or care about the mortals, except for what they can use them for. Thus Celestia, just like Apollo, leaves out information because the affairs of mortals are utterly meaningless to her, and the fun of trolling them is the only use she can find for them. The only mortals she cares about are those in her kingdom, Equestria, just as Athena cared for Athens, and all other pagan gods for their respective areas, but this care never extended beyond the instrumental value they could gain. Now, I called the indifference of pagan gods a flaw in the argument, and in order to explain why, I will need to delve into Christian theology. I have already mentioned the likelihood of a Christian influence on the audience, but the same goes for the creators as well, living as they do in a strongly Christian country. As a result, the main problem with taking a pagan-only view of Celestia is that she is in fact a benevolent influence, despite her somewhat unhelpful advice. The reason this is such a problem for a pagan view is that, as previously discussed, pagan gods gave only instrumental value to mortals, the mortals they could gain from using them for worship, entertainment, and so on, whereas a benevolent god cares about mortals for their intrinsic value, the value they have in and of themselves, apart from what the use they may serve. For this criticism to make sense, I must first defend Celestia's benevolence itself against her Celestia reputation. To do this, I'll use two examples from the show. The first is Celestia's reaction to Rarity's praising her.
You're very welcome.
No, really. This is so nice of you.
It's nothing, really.
Oh, but it isn't nothing. It's everything. I just don't know what to say, but thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You are very welcome.
Thank you.
As is fairly clear, Celestia feels awkward being praised in such a manner, in stark contrast to the Greek gods, who fight each other over praise, such as Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite squabbling over the opinion of Paris in the prologue to the Trojan War. Thus Celestia is not in it for the praise. However, this doesn't differentiate her from the more calculating gods, such as Hades, who is often more concerned with power over mortals than their praise. This is where my second example comes in, Celestia's fight with Chrysalis.
My changeling army will break through. First, we take Canterlot, and then all of Equestria.
No. You won't. You may have made it impossible for Shining Armor to perform his spell, but now that you have so foolishly revealed your true self, I can protect my subjects from you!
Shining Armor's love for you is even stronger than I thought. Consuming it has made me even more powerful than Celestia!
The elements of harmony. You must get to them and use their power to defeat the Queen.
Here is definitive proof that Celestia cares for her subjects, as she defends them first of all, fighting on the front lines when it matters most. Zeus, meanwhile, is content to simply aid from afar, sitting on Mount Ida, overlooking Troy in the Iliad, but never fighting, nor falling for the sake of his people. In order to fully establish Celestia's benevolence, it is now time for the promised theology. The final problem remaining is the recurring issue with Celestia's false advice, withholding information seemingly out of malice. Under the pagan view, this was solved, as pagan gods are simply indifferent. However, as we have started to see, Celestia seems more benevolent, and cares for her subjects. How then can her actions be reconciled with her words? The answer is found in the way God is represented in the Old Testament. If I am right in suggesting force was also influenced by Christianity when creating Celestia, then the story of Isaac and Abraham solves the inconsistency quite well. God tells Abraham, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering." This he reluctantly sets about doing, and just as he is about to kill Isaac, an angel prevents him, revealing that it was merely a test of faith. This is similar to Celestia telling Twilight to act by herself in the Crystal Empire, when in reality she is testing her. Although the examples are not exactly the same, the intention, which I believe is more important, is. In both cases, the gods withhold information, not to bring harm to the subject, but in order to test and teach them. Thus, all of Celestia's supposedly malevolent actions can be seen as deliberate and benevolent, as it is more advantageous to have learned something for oneself, through a god's help, than to have been told what to do without understanding why. What does this mean for Celestia, then? Is she a pagan or a Christian god? The answer is that she is neither, and she is both. She is not completely omnipotent, and rules over a specific territory, like a pagan god, but she is benevolent and cares for her subjects, like the Christian god. Some may be disgruntled by this mishmash of ideas, but I for one believe it is wonderful. The pagan parts of her character allow her to retain her divinity, even as more gods, such as Alicorn Twilight, are introduced. Just as how Greek heroes like Heracles did not stop the gods being gods by ascending themselves. Furthermore, the lack of omnipotence also solves what is known as the problem of evil, the largest debate in theology, which concerns how a good god can let evil exist. The pagan elements allow the answer, Celestia does not have the power to vanquish evil alone, while retaining divinity, whereas the Christian god would not be God without omnipotence. In conclusion, due to the influence of Christianity along with Greek pagan mythology, Celestia is an amalgamation of pagan and Christian god, retaining some limitations and some advantages from both. To think of her as entirely one or the other, however, breaks apart her character, making her either malevolent in the pagan example or too weak in the Christian example. What we are left with, then, is a god unique to ponydom, and all the finer because of it. Thank you for watching. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Am I right to take the middle ground? Again? Or do the pagan or Christian models seem to fit Celestia better? Until next time, this is Nightsphere the Gnostic. Goodbye.